Professor Camilla Naidu, Executive Dean, Faculty of Humanities. Professor Kezia Batisai, our inductee for today. Professor Selina Mudavanyu, Respondent, Associate Professor in the Communication Studies and Media Arts Department at McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada. Members of Senate and other academics, distinguished guests, students who might be present here, all who are joining us online, Sanibonani, Huyenant, good evening, Tober. It is indeed a great honor and a special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inauguration lecture of Professor Kezia Batisai. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to her loved ones, special guests, and colleagues. This is indeed a proud and joyful, yet a landmark moment for all of you. For Professor Batisai, for us here at UJ, for higher education in South Africa, and beyond the Limpopo. The inauguration of professors is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into office by the Vice Chancellor and deliver their inaugural addresses. The ceremony has its roots in the medieval university and serves multiple purposes. First, it is an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it provides a platform for professors to display their expertise in the discipline and showcase their research. In the colonial tradition subscribed to by many universities, assuming the role of the professor refers to the gown and the cap. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown denoting professorship will formally be assumed. Today we gather to witness Professor Batisai's entry into the illustrious community of scholars at our university. It celebrates her contributions to the discipline and ultimately her impact on society. Professors provide a university with its identity, character, academic legitimacy, and integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of a person as a professor. This evening we will listen to Professor Kezia Batisai as the gown goes to town. By this I mean that the power of the inaugural address is when the expertise is showcased beyond the corridors of the university and reverberates with society. It stands out as a moment of pride for the incumbent, the family, fellow scholars, the university, and ultimately society. In the past, several philosophers and scholars have defined universities using very narrow conceptualizations. For example, the search for truth or for universal knowledge, and even as instruments serving the purposes of the economy or being utilitarian in nature. Through our work and research at UJ, I hope that we can break out of these narrow conceptualizations and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good, working towards societal impact. What then is the role of the intellectual? Edward Said, in one of his articles, defines the role of the intellectual as follows. 1, one who commands a vast knowledge of a specific discipline. Or 2, one who is rigorous in the analysis of literature. 3, one who views being an intellectual as a vocation or a calling. And lastly, one who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies. It remains then for us as a university with a Pan-African vision to derive our mandate as intellectuals and professors. And importantly, how do we embrace the role of a professor as a disruptor while continuing to be flagship careers of our disciplines? This evening, we will listen to Professor Kezia Batisai as one further step in the journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not conclude once this lecture is given. Notwithstanding, the inaugural lecture does create an opportunity for a self-reflective pause in the journey of a professor. Let me now invite the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Professor Kamila Naidu, to introduce Professor Kezia Batisai. Professor Naidu. Thank you. Bye, thank you.
Good evening, Sanibonani, Dumelang, Goeienaand, and Moroi. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities. I acknowledge Vice Chancellor Functionary, COO, Dr. Mpoti Ralepata, Professor Selina Mudavanu from McMaster University in Canada, and Prof. Kezia Batisai. I welcome all our distinguished guests, colleagues, and members of Prof. Batisai's family within the venue and online. It is, of course, a great pleasure to be here today at the inaugural lecture of Prof. Kezia Batisai, and my role is to tell you a little bit about who Prof. Kezia is. Kezia is a sociologist who holds a PhD in gender studies, obtained from the University of Cape Town in 2013. Her PhD thesis, supervised by Professor Jane Bennett, is titled Body Politics, an Illumination of the Landscape of Sexuality and Nationhood, Re-Seeing Zimbabwe Through Elderly Women's Representations of Their Sexual and Gendered Lives. Kezia also holds an honors and a Master of Science degree in Sociology and Social Anthropology, obtained from the University of Zimbabwe. After obtaining her PhD, she joined the Department of Sociology at UJ as a lecturer on the 1st of August 2014. She was promoted to senior lecturer on the 1st of August 2017 and to associate professor on the 1st of October 2018, and then to full professor on the 1st of October 2022. Focusing her gaze on gender, sexuality, land, migration, HIV/AIDS, and health policy, Kezia's research questions notions of marginality and the meaning of being different that expose the politics of nation building in Africa. Over the years, she has authored and co-authored 40 research outputs, 27 journal articles, 13 book chapters, and several technical reports and opinion pieces located in sociology and gender studies. These publications explore and advance a niche research area and theory of marginality, articulated through an interdisciplinary approach to gender, sexuality, migration, the rights discourse, HIV/AIDS, and health policy. The publications interrogate how people marked by society as the minority based on but not limited to class, sexuality, sexual orientation, gender, race, nationality, citizenship, and migration status negotiate questions of being different in Southern Africa. Kezia's research focus has since 2015 attracted 93 brilliant postgraduate students and fellows, and she's supervised a total of 36 honors, 27 masters, 27 PhDs, and 3 PDRFs. Between 2018, that's a huge achievement. Between 2018 and 2024, Kezia made selfless efforts to mentor and co-publish 25 research outputs with her former and current postgraduate students, PDRFs, and research associates. With this outstanding supervision and mentorship record, Kezia won the 2022 Best Postgraduate Teacher Award in the Faculty of Humanities. Beyond the academy, Kezia has over 20 years of community engagement as a research assistant, a principal researcher, and an advisor for local and international organizations. These organizations include United Nations Women, USAID, CIDA, IOM, the Ford Foundation, NOREC, Norwegian Agency for Exchange Cooperation, and many, many more. Kezia's research profile has increased the online visibility of her name. She has presented 50 papers at local and international conferences and workshops. Local and international academic communities, as well as private and governmental organizations, recognize her as an invaluable expert in sociology and gender studies, and she is often invited to serve as a peer reviewer of journal articles and book proposals, and as an external examiner of dissertations and theses across Southern African universities, as well as in Namibia and Zimbabwe. In 2023, Kezia was invited to serve as a member of a newly established Ban Ki-moon Center Expert Council named EVWA Council, elevating the voices of women in agriculture. In 2021, she was invited to join the Research Network Law, Gender and Sexuality International Steering Committee and serve on the editorial board of a new Bristol University Press journal known as Gender and Justice. In 2020, she was invited to assist the United Nations Women and the SACBC in developing a theory of change in the context of HIV/AIDS, harmful alcohol consumption, gender-based violence, and femicide. Over the years, Kezia, who has established a profound local, regional, and international network of people who, like her, take the question of gender into their frame of theorization. Consequently, she has managed to keep in touch with emerging debates in the fields of gender studies and sociology in ways that enhance the two disciplines as she spreads her academic wings and flies within and beyond the boundaries of the University of Johannesburg and South Africa. And with this introduction, I would like us to welcome Prof. Kezia Batisai with a warm round of applause.
Good evening to you all. Allow me to say all protocol observed. The title of my lecture is Navigating Marginality from the Village to the World. As you listen carefully to the presentation, you'll be able to make sense of the latter phrase, which is from the village to the world. I open this lecture with a profound quotation. Mwana uyu ngaphiwe mari yechikoro, adzidze kusvika pekupedzisira. These were the words of Grison Mgumo Batisai in April 1993. My father's last words about me from his deathbed in the first quarter of 1993. When my father got sick and died, I was only 13 in my first term of high school in boarding school. I asked for permission from the school authorities to walk from my boarding school to the mission hospital where my father was admitted. Naive about death and the possibility of losing a parent, him specifically, I took with me my assessments for that school term to the hospital. However, upon arrival, I noticed that my father was in a terrible state, and all the joys of bragging to him about my excellent grades just vanished into thin air. As I was trying to embrace the reality of his state, he relayed the message above, the one that I said in Shona, through which he requested that financial resources be made available to ensure that I'm educated until the highest qualification possible. 3 decades later, I stand before you and the rest of the world, bearing testimony of the manifestation of my father's words. Words of appreciation to my father. Baba, I have achieved the highest academic qualification against all odds. Your daughter is now a professor, defined by Google as a high-ranking academic at a university or other post-secondary institution who is an expert in the field and teaches at the highest level. The term comes from the Latin word for a person who professes. May your spirit and your love for English, both language and literature, live on. Many thanks to my 82-year-old mother, Miss Grace Abenia, commonly known in a village and the sphere of influence as Miss Teres, known as mistress, pronounced as Miss Teres, female teacher. Madam Gumo, Mbuya Mgumo, Maimeshia, Vate Maimeshi, Mbuya Vatinotenda, for sending me to school. Words of appreciation to my mother. Mai, I know you are watching with my siblings and the rest of the family in Zimbabwe. You deserve a lifetime achievement for all the impact you have made in my life, your family, and your village in Saka Masvingo province. We are all proud of you, and we deeply appreciate your selfless dedication to education as a tool for navigating and fighting marginality. Beyond educating me and my sisters, you directly and indirectly educated the entire clan, from your siblings to your nieces and nephews, grandchildren, and children within your reach. Above all, I appreciate the gift of life, for you have lived to witness this day. I tap into the grace of longevity, excellence, and your unparalleled generosity. Giving my mother all the credit for my academic achievements would be a regrettable and unforgivable omission, because my mother did not educate me alone. Instead, she and a solid social capital with outstanding economic capital sent me to the best boarding school, St. Anthony's High School in Masvingo province. This is within the context of the province. I'm not saying the entire Zimbabwe. Worth mentioning are the Chipatos, and their daughter is here with us, Dr. Ngoni Chipato. Miss S. Chipato, Mbuya Mai Cynthia, and the late E.D. Chipato, commonly known as Sekuru Bachi. May his soul continue to rest in peace for their unwavering all-round support. Special thanks go to my German family since 1986, I might be wrong. Hyde Hiss and Sliva Reynolds, who are watching online. I'm particularly grateful to Hyde for investing in my intellect, even in its embryonic stages, and to Sylvia for the love that she expressed to me and the rest of the family over the decades. Professor Jane Bennett, my PhD supervisor at the University of Cape Town, thank you for sharpening my critical skills as I grappled with the original work of Foucault on body politics and surveillance policing in my effort to re-see the nation, which is Zimbabwe, through elderly women's representations of their embodied sexual and gendered lives. I immensely benefited from your thought-provoking linguistic background. Selina and I often talk about your reference to impossible concatenations in one of the many conversations you engaged in during our time at UCT. It was not easy to be supervised by Jane Bennett. Those who know Jane will appreciate where I am today, because she made a huge impact in my intellect. Although not exhaustive, the foregoing serves as an acknowledgement of people who were central to how I navigated and overcame encounters with marginality at an early age, which had the potential to crush my dreams and destiny. It's in the past, I'll not say it, but it's important that I highlight. The encounters align with the definition of marginality as a condition emerging from the low socioeconomic and political position occupied by certain groups, e.g. young women, that prevents them from accessing resources and services such as education and health. Furthermore, marginality also encompasses being born into a disenfranchised social class, which reduces one's ability to acquire skills for employment, hindering their ability of self-actualization or to enjoy their rights and freedom of choice. Marginality goes beyond conditions of deprivation and socioeconomic exclusion to mark physical location, living conditions, and geographical spaces which marginalized groups occupy, far from infrastructure and institutions that ensure their health and well-being. If you were listening carefully, I told you that I went to St. Andrew's High School, and this is a school that was in a rural area. So some of these things apply to my high school days. So I would like to reflect on my academic trajectory, and I pose the question, who am I and why does this matter? The temporal landscape of this lecture moves back and forth from remembered time in the different stages of my life cycle, located in diverse geographical spaces within and beyond the boundaries of my nationalized identity as a Zimbabwean. Since questions of interrogating marginality revolve around the politics of diversity, inclusion, and exclusion, I pose a self-introspective question. Who am I and how am I different? In response to such a question, I profile those categories that best describe my personhood, simultaneously capturing how I have navigated marginality and negotiated being the other within specific contexts and time zones. The construct self as other as a tool of analysis embraces various identifying categories such as gender, race, class, and sexuality, central to the reflexive self-discovery exercise. A mapping of my academic trajectory takes me back to 1995, when I was allocated subjects of specialization in Form 3, which is an equivalent of grade 10 in the South African context. As alluded to above, St. Andrew's High School was one of the best, if not the best, in the province. My elder brother, engineer Dr. Menard Mugumo, PhD UJ, he should be in the auditorium. If not, he's still stuck in traffic somewhere from Pretoria, who also went to the same school, can attest to this. In the late 90s, there was a year when the entire A-level class or cohort, which is equivalent to matric, obtained outstanding grades and got admitted into the prestigious and highly competitive University of Zimbabwe then. The school achieved these excellent results under the excellent leadership and guidance of the renowned headmaster, Mr. Fabian Ramainengeze, commonly known among students as FR after his initials, and nicknamed Ziguru, which I don't know what it meant then because I was a naughty. May his soul continue to rest in peace. My fellow St. Andrew's School and classmates, if you are watching, allow me to infer and illuminate that despite the excellent structure and results, there was some degree of marginalization within the school. For instance, there were 3 classes across Form 1 and Form 4 classes. A decision about the subjects wanted to take in Form 3 and Form 4, which also determined one specialization in Form 5 and Form 6, was imposed on students based on the results obtained in Form 2. Although there were 6 subjects that were similar across Form 3 and Form 4 classes: English, Maths, Geography, Science, History, and Shona. The A class specialized in pure sciences, physics, biology, and chemistry, while the B class specialized in commercials, economics, and the other 2 subjects that I can't remember. I didn't want to take chances. And the C class specialized in arts, commerce, agriculture, and religious studies. On the classification day in 1995, I was internally crushed after learning that my name was on the list of students selected for the looked down upon, stereotyped, marginalized arts class. Although my name was on the top of the list, meaning I was the top achiever on that list. On that day, I took a walk of shame down the Form 3 corridor into the arts classroom with the highest degree of resentment towards my new reality. In the absence of a platform to contest the decision, no opportunities for career guidance, I embraced my fate and internally decided to fight and resist marginality intellectually. I told and convinced myself that I was going to be the top achiever in the arts class, which I did, and maintained my position in the top 3 of the stereotyped class until I completed my O-level in 1996. Beyond debunking the high school stereotypes, my adolescent encounter with marginality became very central to my high school journey, which was explicitly shaped by the art subjects that I further specialized in at A level and obtained excellent grades. Thereafter, I was enrolled at the University of Zimbabwe as a BSc Honors in Sociology undergraduate student, a qualification that not only ushered me into the MSc in Sociology and Social Anthropology program, but also laid the much needed foundation for continuing my unfinished business of fighting marginality intellectually. At this stage, reflections on my academic trajectory take me back to August 2003, when I was appointed as a graduate teaching assistant, and my colleague, Dr. Tinashe Pigu, she was a senior at UZ. She remembers our Office 115, and my colleague Tapiwa Chagonda, Prof. Chagonda, we also use that office as well. Office 115 is graduate teaching assistants in the Department of Sociology. To June 2005, when I joined Great Zimbabwe University, which is another university in a different province, as a relatively young lecturer in sociology, and to August 2011, when I downgraded to the tutorial room at the University of Cape Town. I consider it a downgrade because I was already a lecturer, but at this stage I had to become a tutor. A strategy that I adopted almost 2 years into my PhD journey to keep myself in the teaching loop. The strategy worked very well because on the 1st of August, like Prof. Naidu indicated, exactly 3 years later, the tutorial experience, along with my past as an academic in Zimbabwe, became an inroad into a full-time and permanent academic career as a sociology lecturer at this university. And the rest you were told by Prof. Camilla. Wondering, one may ask, why am I bothering the audience with reflections on my academic trajectory? My response to this question takes the audience to my academic identity as a feminist sociologist, an identity that not only respects experience, but allows me to draw on often trivialized experiences, or personal experiences rather. As such, the methodology that I adopt for this inaugural lecture cannot be separated from my multiple subjective positionalities that have significantly influenced how I have navigated marginality over the years. Combined, the subjective experiences have helped me to establish an epistemological and methodological voice that has culminated into what I present to you today as my inaugural lecture titled Navigating Marginality from the Village to the World. This lecture brings to life my philosophy as a feminist sociologist, a philosophy that does not allow me to ignore the personal, because though private, it affects the public, including what I research, publish, and teach. Self is other, ontological and epistemological questions of marginality. It's getting deep. The analysis of self draws on characteristics that are either unique to an individual or similar to a collective. Self, from this standpoint, becomes the other, based on the ways an individual perceives or is perceived as different from the collective. I therefore explore the notion of marginality as experienced by self when self is constructed as the other. The construct self as other raises ontological and epistemological questions that serve as powerful phenomenological lenses through which questions of marginality could be imagined and explored. My endeavor here is to engage ontological questions of marginality that emerge as notions of selfhood, personhood, vis-a-vis collective identities are interrogated. These are questions deeply embedded in the subjective meanings I assign to my lived experience of being different, marginalized, and the subsequent othering. For instance, I draw on the category of race to explore ontological questions around how my hair experiences, hair as in hair, have opened avenues for engaging with the politics of racial identity, especially the meaning of being Black in spaces where straight hair for Black women is construed either as good hair or an identity crisis. Touches of sarcasm that emerged as the result of my hair being straight provoked me to think through the meaning of hair and to interrogate whether hair could be racist and marginalizing depending on time, space, and place. As a result, I learned how to embrace my natural Black hair as one of the many categories that affirm my ethnic identity. My experiences of being gendered as a girl at girlhood through young womanhood to adulthood also illuminate the significance of the construct self as the other in the study of identity, difference, and marginality. The gendering process, irrespective of good girlhood innocence, taught me how to navigate inferior other identity compared to boys and men who occupy the highest level of the gendered and sexual hierarchy in my world. These past experiences, located in what I frame as personal history making epochs, are fully alert to the significance of time, memory, and space in the process of interpreting self and assigning meaning to one's world in the marginalization thereof. Personal observations of how the politics of living through a body marked as different, unfold in South Africa also reveal the relevance of time and space to the analysis of self as other. Navigating these terrains entails implicitly or subtly embracing the other label, such that ontological questions about the meaning of identity create discursive lenses through which one's personhood as a foreign body could be explored. Emerging out of these ontological engagements is the realization that individual or collective identities and differences are both constitutive of and constituted by variations in place and time. Beyond these ontological questions, the phenomenon of self as other raises epistemological questions about identity and difference that probe whether subjective experiences should be part of what we call knowledge, or should knowledge be generated from collective identities. These ontological, epistemological questions capture the methodological implications of employing subjective positionalities and experiences as a source of knowledge when trying to understand the phenomenon of identity and difference and advance the theory of marginality. Beyond my subjective experiences, I use the notion of self as other as a theoretical, conceptual, and methodological tool to research and analyze the experiences of people who, like me, have been pushed to the margins and peripheries of society. And like Prof. Camila Naidu said, I've done research over the past decade and even before on marginality. And I just want to showcase some of the work that I've done that pushes forward the notion of marginality. So beyond my subjectivities, I'll present to you stories of the marginalized. So she gave you a breakdown of the book chapters and the journals that I've published, but combined these research outputs located in my broad areas of specialization, gender studies and sociology, allowed me to explore and advance my niche area. And this you have already heard, so I'll sort of skip part of this. But if you look in the booklet, you see there's a list of publications that I've done on marginality, and I'll be summarizing some of these publications. I just thought I should flag them so that you can see the theory of marginality in action. So the paragraphs below provide succinct narratives of my work's contribution to stories of the marginalized and its broader significance in gender studies and sociology. In the context of health, the notion of marginality is articulated through a theoretical, conceptual, and empirical focus on access to healthcare. In an article that I co-published with my former student who couldn't make it today, PhD student that is, Zimiri, I explored the fighting against HIV and AIDS within a resource-constrained rural setting using a case study of the Ruveneko program in Chirumanzu, Zimbabwe. This research output demonstrated the importance of a holistic approach in mitigating the impact of HIV and AIDS in resource-constrained, often marginalized rural settings. It arrived at the conclusion that a holistic approach involving effective community mobilization, religious and cultural ethos, as well as the gendered approach, played a pivotal role in making Ruveneko a unique rural initiative responding to the human threats posed by HIV and AIDS. These insightful empirical conclusions were arrived at in light of my previous research output, which I published in 2016, which recommended a move towards an integrated approach to health and medicine in Africa, not only informed by the intersections of medicine and humanities that are intrinsic to our understanding of the practice of healthcare in Africa. Instead, in that publication, I grapple with seemingly simple questions about when, where, how to seek medical attention. These sound very simplistic, but wait until you want to seek medical care, then you realize that it's a challenge, depending on who you are. Maybe I'm speaking to the wrong audience. But when it comes to issues of care, it's very difficult because we have the public versus private dichotomy, especially in the South African context. And these questions provide pointers to therapy choices and health-seeking behavior, that shift depending on various biological, socioeconomic, and religious backgrounds, and serves as a route into deeper and intense healthcare practice explorations. In 2020, I also published a chapter titled Understanding Health and Health Systems in Southern Africa, and this was published in Clinical Sociology for Southern Africa, co-edited by our colleagues, Prof. Jean Fritz and Prof. Tina Ace. And in this chapter, I revisit and locate and analyze the challenges of healthcare in a broader context, arguing that experiences and practical interventions in the region are shaped by the realities of the broader African context. For instance, the chapter acknowledges the historical aspects of health and health systems in Southern Africa dating back to the colonial periods. The argument is made en route to spelling out that in addition to bureaucracy, corruption, poor leadership, and mismanagement of healthcare funds, the challenge of healthcare rights violations for the marginalized, particularly working class citizens, women and migrants, exposes how supposedly new nations in Africa merely inherited health systems and structures from the colonial past with very minimal intervention and improvement to cater for the shifting demographics and realities. Hence, the need to deconstruct healthcare systems in Africa to improve the provision of healthcare in a comprehensive way that speaks to the socio-economic context and cultural context of the marginalized population in question. Action research in the context of limited healthcare and high rates of HIV and AIDS takes the form of collaborative research projects such as the SACBC projects that I've worked on with my colleagues who are here. These research projects usher new sites for progressive dialogues and interventions on HIV and AIDS aimed at challenging behavior among men in critical yet marginalized sites such as taverns and young women in informal settlements. And this is research that was conducted in South Africa, Mamelodi, Klerksdorp, among other contexts. Findings from such intervention projects illuminate the need to understand and reduce alcohol-related harms in South Africa, especially in the context of high rates of GBV in the country. If alcohol consumption is not kept in check, it poses a huge threat to students, such that these young men and women, as observed in the context of reproductive health, will grow into adulthood with existing and established patterns of health challenges, because adolescence is a foundation that influences the health of future generations. So beyond health realities, the notion of marginality is explored through a theoretical and conceptual empirical focus on migration. In an article that I published with another former master's student who's also here, Lillian Manjo, we exposed how Zimbabwean migrant women in South Africa renegotiate marginality in everyday life through their gender identities and sexual bodies. This echoes empirical findings and conclusions made in earlier research outputs on transnational labor migration, intimacy and relationships, which exposed how Zimbabwean women navigate the diaspora, i.e. the UK and South Africa, if it qualifies as the diaspora, as well as women, Zimbabwean migrant women in trajectories of mothering beyond national borders. What does it mean to be a mother beyond the boundaries of your nationality? In another publication, in a chapter, Re-Theorizing Migration, a South-South Perspective, that I published in a co-edited book by Prof. Pragna, who's also here, Migration in Southern Africa. I propose contextual theories of migration. The theories aim to avoid rendering the specific universal. Let it be specific, don't universalize it if it's specific. So the theory aims to avoid rendering the specific universal by exploring how the state policies the migratory process, the social meaning society attaches to that which is foreign, and the ultimate meaning of being a Black African migrant in Africa. These contextual realities call for a conceptual renegotiation of the meaning of Africanness or African identities, especially for Black Africans located in spaces of violent and brutal prejudice against those perceived as foreign. The main conceptual contribution is built around experiences that have been marginalized as they hardly find their way into mainstream discourses and theorizations, where global North and Asian biases have dominated what has become to be known as literature and theories of migration. And then questions of marginality as well, articulated through polarized constructions of dichotomized images of citizenship. Such constructions are reinforced by ever-evolving grammars and vocabularies about people foreign to South Africa, whose bodies and privates warrant intrusion in very violent, nationalized, racialized, gendered, and sexualized ways, as evidenced by the 2008 and 2015 xenophobic attacks. These realities interrogate questions of national belonging, difference, and xenophobia in South Africa. And the findings reveal that these grammars and vocabularies are usually located on a legitimate, illegitimate binary plane, where the former represents that which is authentic and acceptable, while the latter stands for the intolerable, undesirable. The binary produces an other who is understood in relation to assumed norms or commonalities such that women's bodies and foreign nationals in South Africa constitute diverse minority outgroups that constantly confront the realities of being different, heavily influenced by one's class and social position. Hence the argument, I am not just a foreigner, articulated through progressive self-representations of African migrants in print and social media as they negotiate for space in South Africa. So in terms of gendered notions of marginality, in a failing state are evident in a language that assigns meaning to motherhood, aging, and the state. I cannot talk about marginality from an intellectual perspective and not locate some of these things in my home country. So if you look at motherhood, aging, and the state, and actually the failing state in Zimbabwe, you find that older women push the limits of motherhood in rural Zimbabwe as they battle against all odds to care for the children right into adulthood in the absence of government support, where one never ceases to be a child. Even if they're an adult, they still need the support of their parents in the absence of social services. The same failing state exposes the politics of control and ownership over women's bodies, evident in discourses that shape reproductive and sexual rights in Zimbabwe. Considering these thought-provoking findings, myself and another PhD student, so it's Chupuriro and Batisai, we push for a narrative and contemporary land rights framework that seeks to make visible and audible the violent gendered patriarchal effects women suffer on, for, and through the land. So they are suffering on the land, for the land, and through the land in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and beyond. It is against this background that women's rights to own land should be prioritized, and this can be achieved by revisiting cultural land rights and livelihoods in rural areas and attending to the needs for residential or housing land in urbanized spaces, where South African women read the new democracy in relation to historical and contemporary land needs in the city. Failure to take cognizance of these contextual realities became evident when unpacking the logic of the 2021 food protests and how the ruthless state, in conjunction with the mainstream media, demonized the hungry, looting black body. So we argue that they demonized the hungry, looting body during the lockdown in the name of security and well-being of South Africa. This is contestable, but yes, I am saying it. The research outputs arrive at beyond nationalisms and binary theory. I'll take this again because I'm summing up the marginality. So all these research outputs that I've presented to you, they arrive at beyond nationalisms and binary theory. It's a theory that I'm coining that is inspired by the observation that, similar to the women's land struggles that are shared across Africa, being Black in South Africa is a constant struggle for both citizens and migrants. This observation validates the recommendation that scholars who write about women's struggles in South Africa should go beyond South Africa, should go beyond South African women to encompass women who follow the flow of the Limpopo southwards, because they too seek their emancipation. I'm challenging xenophobia here. Juxtaposing African migrant women's struggles with those of their South African sisters moves these struggles from the margins or peripheries of literature on migrants. Presenting these struggles as polarized slips into unnecessary and uncomfortable hierarchies of Blackness. The collective forms of Blackness move beyond exclusive nationalistic binaries to illuminate the shared experiences, connectedness, and commonalities amongst Black, irrespective of nationality and contextualized cultural specificities. The theoretical standpoints acknowledge that the most significant differences amongst Blacks intersect and collectively influence their positionalities, which in turn determine how they access opportunities and resources and what they produce as knowledge. So let's look at the commonalities and map the way forward. The commonalities are echoed by conclusions I arrived at in my recent work on the experiences of Black academics in higher education and the need to decolonize the space in the broader African context. And I co-edited a book with Prof. Selina Mdavan, who's going to respond to my talk, and another colleague, a former UJ PDRF, Prof. Shepard Mpov, who's now at UNISA. And the title of the book is Decolonizing Media and Communication Studies in Education in Sub-Saharan Africa. And you wonder, where do I fit as a sociologist? I'm a jack of all trades. I identify opportunities using the marginality lens. So where there's marginalization, I'm in. So the last theme that I want to talk about is negotiating or navigating marginality in postgraduate teaching and supervision. And this inaugural lecture will be incomplete if I end it without reflecting on postgraduate teaching and supervision, which is my strength and my passion. It has been central and closely linked to my research outputs and profile. The theory of marginality that guides my research in the discipline, in addition to other relevant literature, informs and impacts the way I teach at the postgraduate level. For instance, decoloniality has always been central to feminist theorization, such that when the opportunity to explicitly integrate it into the curriculum finally came with the student movements in 2015, I grabbed it. Teaching and or researching from this standpoint allows me to draw from resources that are available, that contribute to the decolonization process, fully alert to the fact that decolonization means different things for different people. That notwithstanding, my PhD students are working on different aspects of the gender question, explore the notion of decolonization through an African feminist lens, which, for example, deconstructs universalistic knowledges. He spoke about finding the truth or establishing the truth, but now we talk about universalistic knowledges, not just knowledge, because it's plural, and the production of such. In doing so, I guide my students to incorporate topical debates and emerging theorizations in the discipline. For instance, those who adopt the feminist standpoint have to critically engage with the existing debate on decoloniality and the body, and demonstrate how this speaks to new discourses about decolonizing the institutions and the curriculum. In the process, they problematize and challenge the narrow idea of decolonizing the body when the institutions within which the body is located or by which it is shaped are yet to be decolonized. So we mustn't start with the body, let's start with the institutions. When the institution is decolonized, then the body can find a place to say, I have a home. Building on my existing commitment to producing an excellent generation of researchers, I use my feminist positionality to challenge and deconstruct hierarchized systems of knowledge production. The approach also speaks to Samuel's notion of qualitative education, directed towards the involvement of learners in the process of constructing content. As I debunk the supervisor-student hierarchy, power is devolved in a way that allows the co-creation of knowledge. Thus, the student owns his or her study and becomes comfortable to suggest different ways of approaching the study. However, this is not meant to undermine and marginalize my responsibilities in the research journey. In other words, the student has space to make research decisions and adopt methodological and theoretical standpoints that are informed by his or her positionalities and or complex identities, including nationality, gender, sexuality, and social, political, and economic background. Remember, we are talking about marginality, and we are saying the self is central to the construction of meaning and knowledge. So why should a supervisor silence the student? They bring their own baggage into the research context, so they should be allowed to reflect on who they are and allow who they are to inform the research process along the way. Therefore, I encourage my postgraduate students to reflect and draw on their multiple positionalities, including previous research experience, so that they construct a better research argument for their current studies. When they present their research ideas to me, I guide them accordingly without imposing my own ideas. However, the research-oriented structure of the postgraduate modules allows me to share with my students my practical experience of engaging with and managing projects for regional and international organizations in different contexts. So emerging out of the discussion above are success stories associated with my approach to postgraduate supervision that takes marginality seriously. And I present a table that shows the success stories of my journey as a supervisor that only started in 2015. By the way, I came to UJ August 1st, 2014, but my supervision journey started in 2015. Prof. Camila Naidu didn't allow me to supervise in my first 6 months. So I didn't have the capacity to supervise because I was just learning the ropes within the university. So I only started to supervise in 2015. But if you look at the table, allow me to brag, I've made an impact. There's nothing fulfilling like the graduation ceremonies at UJ, because Prof. Camila Naidu will be introducing the faculty, and as I'm sitting there, before I even warm the seat, she's calling me to read out the abstract of another PhD, and another PhD, and another PhD, and another PhD in the same sitting. And I'm proud. I'm normally modest, but today I have to acknowledge what I've done because I've been given a platform to do so. So as an academic who can sense marginalization from a distance, I invest in the well-being of my postgraduate students and try to eliminate factors that deter excellence in learning. Postgraduate studies tend to be a lonely and marginalizing journey, especially for part-time students. I therefore support my students financially and strongly encourage them to create time to attend workshops and conferences so that they interact, get inspired, remain motivated, and learn from their colleagues. For instance, I co-authored 4 abstracts with my students across qualifications, MA and PhD, and course supervisors. And these were presented at the 2022 Technology and Society in Africa conference held from 20 to 21 October 2022. In addition, I always link my students who work on related topics to keep in touch and share ideas beyond supervision spaces. And I'm proposing to the Dean that I want to pioneer something that I call, I put my students on what I call autopilot. When I see that a student is making progress and they can supervise themselves, I allow them to, adventure and submit to me as and when they feel the work is ready, and I concentrate on another cohort because I supervise in cohorts. I don't want a mind shift where I come from a proposal and then I go to data analysis, and from data analysis to finalization. So they move in groups. And I'm proposing a supervision approach that allows us to have students who are at the same stage to sort of supervise themselves under the supervision of a supervisor. So they are developing their proposal. They know what is expected of them. They have received feedback. So in the process, they critique themselves and they present the challenges to me. But that should not take away my responsibility as a supervisor. And with the approval of the Dean and my HOD, Prof. Maleko Tohaed, who's here, we'll pioneer that next year. For instance, I link students across qualifications who work on migrants and xenophobia in South Africa, the realities of COVID-19 in South Africa, gender, migration, work, ICTS, and 4IR, and students who, despite the difference in topics adopt an African feminist standpoint. As I work with these students, I often identify language and writing challenges stemming from contextual specificities. Over the years, I successfully handled queries, concerns, which include financial challenges, visa issues, social economic concerns, depression, suicidal thoughts, and that often push students to the margins of higher education. Where necessary, I responded to these needs by referring the students facing such challenges to the relevant offices, such as the Postgraduate Center and the Center for Psychological Services and Career Development for assistance. The interventions kept my students on the program until they completed their studies against all odds. Similar to me, remember I told you I went to school against all odds. So that inspires me and makes me feel that to do more for people who experience similar challenges. These interventions, as Prof. Naidu, SOTL related article, subtle article, co-authored with my former students that speaks to challenges students grapple with in higher education and recommends taking academic mentoring programs seriously. And this is an article that I co-authored with my then honors master. She started with me at honors. I supervised her into masters. Now she just submitted a PhD and she's sitting in this venue. Haladi Makafola and Pomolo Maoba, Rethinking Inclusion in Higher Education, Lessons for the South African Academic Space. It was published in the South African Journal of Higher Education. To date, my interest in the SALTL has attracted MA and PhD students who work on 4IR and its impact on higher education, among other sectors. There's a deliberate intention to publish more SALTL articles that enhance my approach to teaching and learning and to gain more insight into the 4IR and its broader impact on society. And UJ is moving towards social impact. I don't want to be a professor without an impact. So if I don't want to theorize either without an impact. So if it means publishing these articles that speak to the realities that students encounter and finding solutions, let it be. Furthermore, I always look for opportunities or create them if they are not there for my postgraduate students beyond the support they get from the faculty and the department. For instance, on the 8th of July 2022, as part of the Carnegie Fellowship collaborative research between myself and my colleague, Professor Selina Mdavanu, we trained and mentored 18 postgraduate students at UJ on digital storytelling as a tool for research and knowledge mobilization. And some of the students who attended that are here, and that's an image of our exquisite encounter at some hotel here in Parktown. Ideally, the students were supposed to come from different departments across the faculty, but due to recruitment challenges during the UJ winter vacation, as well as restrictive fellowship timeframes, the 18 students were drawn from my 2022 MA and PhD cohort. Nonetheless, I'm proud to mention that I have a cohort of diverse students big enough to host or hold a postgraduate workshop. The collage above is evidence of the collaborative support that we created for students, which also contributed towards embracing the recently acquired methodological skill, which is digital storytelling. Thereafter, Prof. Selina and myself coordinated virtual postgraduate student mentoring workshops between October 2022 and January 2023. And students were welcome to bring their questions to the virtual office hours. So we logged in, chill, and wait for students to come and pose questions. The topics for the capacity building workshop included ontological and epistemological questions, situated knowledges, decolonizing research, literature reviews, research questions, research methodology, both qualitative and quantitative research methods, conducting fieldwork, data analysis, and dissertation or thesis write-up. So it was just open, depending on the needs of the students. And we operated that virtual office, myself and Prof. Selina. As I conclude, I have to acknowledge the letters of endorsement that were written by the student that I supervised, both past and present, in support of my application for the 2022 Best Postgraduate Teacher Award. And these students, Dr. Selina Meyers, she's here. Dr. Kwashirai Zokuomba is not here. Dr. Rejoice Chipuriro, watching online. Dr. Christina Dzimiri, also watching online, and soon to be Drs. Haladi Makafola and soon to be Dr. Chennai Chikoto. They appreciated the unwavering support for, so in summary, they appreciated the following: unwavering support for their studies and numerous reference letters when applying for funding. I wish I could show you. I've got a folder labeled references, and in that folder, there's a subfolder for each student. And within a folder for a student, there's even a subfolder, GES, URC. And when I'm writing letters, it can take me like 2 days because I'm getting requests upon requests from students. So they appreciated numerous reference letters, and also just to inspire those that are watching, especially UJ students, don't give up on applying for funding. It's possible, you can get it. All my students have been on funding, with a few exceptional. Caregiving approach to supervision, mentorship and coaching experience, academic traits and mentorship skills comparable to none. These are the words of the students. Excellent ability to cultivate research skills in students, the thoroughness and push for academic rigor, excellent academic prowess and aptitude, and outstanding communication skills. I wish I could project the letters. One of them had this to say: years after passing through a capable hands, I can safely attribute my current commendations as an academic to a mentorship. Overall, experiencing UJ and the PhD journey through me became an empowering tool that has elevated them to international standards and granted them opportunities within and beyond the African continent. I just changed to first person, but it was written by the student. So going forward, where do I go from here? Theorizing and conceptualizing marginality. As an intellectual activist, I will continue to challenge marginality intellectually. In doing so, I will not cease to draw on the personal because it constantly affects and influences my public academic life. My forthcoming book project draws on the medical challenges that I've encountered over the years. As I went under the knife multiple times. I will not tell you how many times because you wonder how am I still standing. In 2019, for instance, I had a molar pregnancy, a rare complication of pregnancy, and eventually I lost the baby with further gynecological complications, which saw me in and out of hospital, theater to be specific. Throughout semester 2 of 2019, saw me in and out of hospital throughout semester 2 to address the complications. The complications persisted, and towards the end of semester 1 in 2021, so from 2019 to 2021, I was dealing with the complications. So I went through a life-changing major surgery. I encountered life-threatening post-surgery complications, which required readmission into the hospital at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thereafter, I was on sick leave, and when I came back, I was emotionally exhausted to pick up the pieces. Going forward, I'll work on a self-reflexive manuscript or book that brings to the fore the intersections of my academic and reproductive being. The book will leverage these subjective eventualities, which I'll first present at the 2025 ISA Forum in Morocco, that's next year, as a conference paper titled Navigating Role Overload. Tells of a scared, wounded, yet productive female academic. Below is the abstract of the 2025 ISA abstract. I don't know how am I doing in terms of time. Can I just read the abstract? It says something about me, and I'll end it there. In my chapter, the 2017 chapter, titled Mothering Beyond National Borders, I analyzed the trajectories of Zimbabwean migrant women in South Africa. The chapter exposes the narrative of fear rooted in the perceived strain of mothering on one's career. Such fear takes us to the question, so how do these identities, a mother and an academic or a career woman, inhibit a being, and how are they played out in daily life, at home and work? These are questions that were posed by a colleague in a review of Pilay's Academic Mothers. Although the review challenges the way Pillay renders the pursuit of a balance between motherhood and an academic career futile, I had avoided pronouncing the name, sorry. She acknowledges that the book opens debate over motherhood in academia, These debates were beyond those I raised in 2017 in my chapter, but I acknowledge that they warranted further exploration. Writing from a biographical standpoint, I revisit these debates in 2024 to map and interrogate my intersecting identities as a Black academic mother, core to personal trajectories of how I have confronted the post-pandemic burnout, fatigue, and role overload as I navigated the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I'm not owing this to COVID-19 alone. I also had my personal medical challenges irrespective of the pandemic. To avoid mourning over the past, the presentation focuses on role overload to expose how the pandemic, beyond blurring work-family life lines, taught me to progressively set boundaries and prioritize self-care. And many thanks to Prof. Naidu, she sent me to a women's leadership program last year. I was supposed to have my inauguration last year, but because of that, I was graduating there, so it had to be moved to this year. I learned about self-care and how to prioritize and when to say no. So I'm setting boundaries and I'm also prioritizing self-care, attributes that I further embraced during the University of Johannesburg 2023 Women's Leadership Development Program. This biographical piece is a powerful theoretical and methodological tool for interpreting the realities of being a Black academic mother, which are summarized by the phrase, tales of a scared, wounded, yet productive female academic. The self-reflective article brings to the fore the intersections of my academic and reproductive being, which, although private, affect the public aspects of life, including my realities as a female academic, especially after the pandemic. Beyond fighting marginality, I have learned to overshare my experiences so that my life serves as a solution to someone out there in a similar situation. I hope that these subjectivities presented in this lecture will inspire many young women and men as well who are trying to navigate marginality and rise from their real or figurative villages to the world. I thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by offering my warm congratulations to you, Professor Kezia Batisai. In Chishona, we say Makorokoto, congratulations. I'm currently in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I recognize that I'm located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. My wish would have been to be there in person to deliver these remarks and also to enjoy the refreshments that follow as we celebrate Professor Batisai. That not being possible, I remain deeply, deeply honored, Professor Batisai, that you invited me to offer these remarks on such an important day in your career, your professorial inauguration. Thank you, Professor Batisai, for the invitation. I would also want to put on the table the fact that talking about your outstanding career in a few minutes was somewhat for me a daunting task. A task that I nonetheless embraced because I agreed to providing the remarks. I first met Professor Batisai at the African Gender Institute at the University of Cape Town. She has just recently registered for her PhD, and I was working at that time as a project officer in the institute. Later, I was to register for my own doctoral degree in the Center for Film and Media Studies at UCT. Within no time, a friendship ensued, which was characterized by sharing many meals and lengthy academic debates. I cannot quite recall, Professor Batisai, how we began calling each other comrades, a title that has over the years evolved to just comms. In personal communication, we hardly refer to each other using our first names. It is always hi comms, then the conversation starts. I think we started using this title as a joke. You can correct me, Professor Batisai, if I'm wrong. We were then making fun of the preposterous ways the title was used by political elite in the ruling party in Zimbabwe. While the following binary categories were not static, the categories I'm going to mention in a few seconds, in ZANU-PF, the title comrade was used to legitimize those in the in-group who possessed liberation war credentials that afforded them privileges that were not available to non-comrades or those in the out-group who were relegated to the margins. Professor Batisai and I now use the term comrade freely, notwithstanding the fact that we have not really decided what we think about socialism or communism. Maybe the next time I'm in Johannesburg, we should have this conversation. We also use the title in a manner that departs and rejects thinking in the ruling party around the use of this term. At the risk of sounding revolutionary and militant, I see us, you and I, Professor Batisai, as academic comrades, as activists who are invested in critically examining the ways those with power constitute meanings about themselves and others in ways that normalize power asymmetries and hierarchical relationships of domination and subordination. We are also, you and I, Professor Batisai, interested in narratives and experiences of those who are kicked to the curb of majoritarian narratives. These people, often embodying minoritized intersecting identities in society, are often misrepresented or excluded. We are interested, you and I, Professor Batisai, in these people's complex and sometimes contradictory narratives. In the last 5 years, you and I have collaborated on 2 major projects. The first was funded by the Carnegie Foundation in collaboration with the Sociology Department at UJ, the Carnegie Foundation African Diaspora Fellowship Program. And the second project that we have collaborated on was a book project that focuses on decolonizing teaching and learning in sub-Saharan Africa. The book was published late last year by Routledge. Professor Batisai, your research program eloquently demonstrates that the voices of the subaltern matter. For you, this is not merely an intellectual undertaking. You have first-hand, insider, embodied knowledges of the meanings of marginality. Since your teenage years to today, you battled and continue to battle subalternity. Okay, maybe now that you have this title of full professor, you will enjoy some class privilege, particularly at family gatherings. Over the years, Professor Batisai, your research productivity has been impressive. You authored and co-authored work that has explored questions of gender, sexuality, land, migration, HIV and AIDS, and health policy from African feminist and decolonial lenses. Your research has probed how minoritized people, because of their intersecting identities, negotiate being different in the context of everyday life. This research has been published in prestigious publications. Professor Batisai, your research calls attention to the idea that collective forms of Blackness move beyond exclusive nationalistic binaries to illuminate the shared experiences, connectedness, and commonalities amongst Blacks, irrespective of nationality and contextual cultural specificities. In the research-focused courses that you teach, it is impressive to hear you speak about the ways you inject your experiences as a researcher in diverse contexts in your classes. Also, in teaching, you explicate the manner in which your complex identities as a researcher impact your methodological and theoretical choices. Your approach to graduate supervision is simply refreshing. You dismiss power hierarchies between yourself and your students, opting to view knowledge production in graduate research as co-creation of knowledges. Fully cognizant of your responsibilities as a supervisor, Professor Batisai, you aver that the students owns their work and becomes comfortable to suggest different ways of approaching the study. Prof. Batisai, the multifaceted strategies that you highlighted of ensuring that graduate students thrive are extraordinary. It is not surprising that you have an impressive record of postgraduate students who complete their studies in a timely fashion. Prof. Batisai, your future monograph, Tales of a Scarred or Wounded Yet Productive Female Academic, is not only timely in terms of knowledge production, it is also breathtakingly important because it encapsulates and makes legible the core pillars of your intellectual project. The book deepens your research trajectory on navigating and contesting marginality. Comms. Professor Kezia Batisai, congratulations once again. Makoro Koto. Thank you all.
We will now robe Professor Kezia Batisai. Let us give our modest Professor Kezia, Batisai, a round of applause. We are coming to the end of our function today, but before we close, let me just thank a few people. Thanks, Prof. Camilla Naidu, our Dean for today. Also, thanks, Professor Selina, or should I say, Comrade Professor, Comrade Professor Selina Mudavanu, our respondent for tonight, our media team at the back there, our photographer, she's already heading for the door. Our photographer, thanks very much, but above all, the woman of the moment, Professor Kezia. I hope I get this right. Mukorokoto. Congratulations once again. At the end, you are invited for some refreshments here in the foyer. Thank you very much for honoring this occasion. We are now finished.